Hello and good afternoon here in Eindhoven, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ahad and I am joined by Asad Rafi from Lahore. Asad, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Ahad. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. It felt like a radio introduction, didn't it? I'm so used to making those kind of introductions that
Welcome to Radio Pakistan.
yes. So before we start, I just want to introduce a little bit about what we're doing here. So Vasl is basically Urdu for connections and unions. And the idea behind it is that we want to have good conversations with good people, trying to see if we can make those difficult conversations easy to digest. So we are on all major platforms. We would love it if you can give us a follow and follow our journey throughout in trying to make difficult conversations easier. So today, we're going to be talking a little bit about facts and opinions and how in the age of digital media, it's becoming very, very difficult to protect ourselves from fake facts, right? So to begin, Asad, why don't you tell me a little bit about facts and opinions and what actually is the difference between the two?
Right. Thank you, Ahad. And so in terms of talking about facts, facts often have their roots, their origin, let's say, to simplify it, in science. You have scientific discoveries where they do, they call a fact that is observable, that is measurable, that is provable. Opinion, on the other hand, is, it's like somebody's opinion. If I can say, hey, let's say my car is better than your car. And then maybe I will base that opinion on facts, like, the horsepower is more, it has better suspension, or, I don't want to talk about cars because that's not my expertise. But you get the gist that opinions are often based on facts, and to come up with an opinion about something, we try to find facts that supports that opinion, right? So, yeah, that's, I think, would be the best way to define the difference.
Yeah. For me, the most interesting thing about this is how people try to not see even facts can be a bit difficult to observe, right? So it is based on the empirical method. It is based in the empirical science of, okay, what is observable, what is measurable, that's great. And for natural sciences, that works really well, right? Because you see, oh, we have air, we have gravity, things are falling, that's great. But when it comes to social aspects, like economics, like sociology, like psychology, where the concept of the empirical method changes a little bit, right? Now it's not based on provable method in terms of, okay, does it exist or not? But in the sense of, okay, probabilistically speaking, how often do not we see this thing occur? And that is where I think things get a little bit murky, because you have these multiple studies done by multiple people that are giving you different results, right? So how does a person deal with that? How can we ensure people that they understand the difference between the empiricism that is based on natural sciences and the fallbacks or the cutbacks of the social sciences?
I mean, that's a very tough one. The reason it's tough because it's like a ongoing war between natural sciences and social sciences. Is one of the competitions that they have between each other. I think I would call it like the beauty of social sciences in that way, because that means you keep trying to find nuances, right? You don't go like, oh, okay, here is the answer, there's the fact, and that's it. But, someone else will come up and they will challenge it. And they're like, hey, actually, in this study, we found this. So I think in social sciences, there might be some facts, but at the same time, you will find facts that oppose them as well. So the point there is that in social sciences, that you continue looking for facts through, the critical understanding that is the core of social sciences, that you keep on going, you keep on finding new stuff, and you continue looking for new facts, because there's no such thing in social sciences as an absolute truth. You continue finding new information, and that will drive, people's opinions and their perspectives and whatnot.
Exactly. I think that is a very key point, as you said, right? There's no absolute truth, right? And to be honest, that is also for the empirical aspect of natural sciences, right? So if you remember gravity, it did not exist before certain person was hit by an apple on the head, right? But it did exist before. It was just never discovered. And that is the thing. We are discovering things over time. Before we knew that the earth was circling the sun, we thought that the sun was circling the earth. But that did not change the absolute truth. It just our understanding of the world. And I think the most important thing that I liked about what you said was that we need to keep updating our beliefs. And that is what the empirical method teaches you. In light of new evidence, you need to update your beliefs. And this is where we get a little bit digressed because this is very, very interesting to me. Would you want to talk to me a little bit about, and I think as a Pakistani, we do feel this very strongly, how certain opinions and beliefs are so closely held that it becomes very, very difficult to challenge them, even in light of new evidence, right? So do you have anything to say about that? Because I think that is a topic which everyone loves to talk about, that it's my beliefs and you should respect them, even if I'm a vegan or not or whatever. But in general, how do we convince people that you should be holding your beliefs loosely?
I'm not going to talk about the religion side of it. I will just look at the politics side of it.
No, not religion. I'm just saying in general.
Yes, okay. To make people, I don't know if you can. The thing with the political side of it, let's say, is that I think it goes even further back. If you look at an individual, is that what kind of education system they have gone through, right? If you are keeping an eye on just the example of, let's say, Pakistan, if I was listening to somebody the other day, how they were talking about, we have the subject called Pakistan Studies, and how in that Pakistan Studies subject, apparently Pakistan's history start from Muhammad bin Qasim coming to what is today Pakistan, and then we take a huge jump, we go to the Mughals, and we miss everything in between, and then from Mughals we just get to 1947. And then even after, from 1947 to today, there's so many pieces that are missing. So I think in the education system, not just in Pakistan, but in a lot of countries, there is not enough encouragement given to students to think critically. They think that, whatever piece of information is given to them, that's the truth. That is not just fact, it is the truth. You have to believe in this and you cannot question it. So when you grow up with, I think, that kind of understanding, and then you have the media here as well that will keep telling you news and everything, and you take everything, at its value, that, whatever these guys are telling me, they can't lie to me. Why would they lie to me, right? So, yeah. And then that shift to, let's say, politics. So I can talk about today's climate. Like, for instance, you have right now in Pakistan, you have Imran Khan, you have, the PMLN Nawaz Party and the People's Party from the Bhutto Party, right? The example of Imran Khan I can take is, for instance, he would, let's say, come on TV and he would say something, let's say he would quote a fact or talk about some survey, and he would say that, my popularity is 70% in Pakistan right now, and the people who are watching it will believe it, right? They will be like, he wouldn't lie, right? But then, yes, and then when you do some research, you realize that survey was of just like 1,000 people or something. It's a country of 250 million people. So yeah, that's the thing there, that we have in, like, I used to be like this too, that we have invested so much in our leaders. We see them as a messiah, right? And whatever information or whatever they share with us, we see it as God's word. Like, this guy, he doesn't lie. He's not corrupt. He is doing everything for us. He wouldn't lie to us, right? So whatever information we are getting it from them, we wouldn't, oppose it, because it's like, let's say, maybe it's somewhat intertwined with our, religious thinking as well, that you cannot question the words of your elders or something like this, or someone you respect. That's like there's a social aspect to it as well. And yeah, so I think that's the thing where it becomes very hard, because people have invested so much in that. And even when they know, maybe deep down in their mind, that it might be something wrong, they don't speak up. To give you an example, like in WhatsApp groups where, this misinformation is shared, they're like echo chambers. And even, let's say, if I'm part of a group, I will see that, oh,
I can imagine. How difficult it is that you see that you're with family and they're sending stupid stuff like, oh, Imran Khan is being done this by because of that, or because Corona was because of Bill Gates, or whatever have you. You just feel like you don't have the energy to do it. You're like, yeah, if I start now, it's gonna be a whole conversation of me trying to explain to them why this is wrong, and then and then in the end, I'm gonna be branded as the person who doesn't understand. So, is it really worth it? And that is indeed the problem that we're facing. That we are facing, that most of the people in the world do not believe in these wrong facts or wrong opinions, but they just do not have the energy, or maybe they do not have a system in place that could help them verify that information. The people who speak the loudest are the ones that get heard, right? And the people who have the conspiracy theories, who have the wrong facts, the Donald Trumps of the world, the Imran Khans of the world, they are going to be the ones who are going to be heard most of the time. The rest of the people are like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I believe him, but who am I to check? And I think that's a good segue into the last part that we're going to be talking about, how we can empower people to have the right systems in place, or organizations that do the fact-checking for them, so that you can have a more informed opinion. I am a bit strict in that way. I believe in this day and age, ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is a choice, right? You need to have an informed opinion. Yes, you can choose to not have an opinion. Like, for example, you're involved politically. So you are involved in the Pakistan government, you're involved in those things. So you have a reason to be involved politically. I live abroad. I am not that much into Pakistani politics. So I do not have an opinion on it. But I don't even research on it. So if someone tells me you need to have an informed opinion, I'm like, I don't, because I don't care enough. That's fine. But if I care enough and I don't have an informed opinion, that's where I think things get murky, because that's the problem. You are having a strong opinion, but you're like, you know what? I'm not going to do the research that's required. It's basically saying you're going to sign up for the Olympics, but you're not going to practice. You're bound to fail, right? That is the whole point.
I agree with that. No, even this going to the last point as well, a thought came into my mind. Another thing, I think this is something we'll discuss in the last segment as well, Ahad, is that it is indeed a challenge overcoming this. And one of the major reasons for that would be is that there's because this is the age of information, right? And there's so much, like, the politics are involved all the way. So when politics get involved into something, what it creates, it creates huge levels of polarization, right? So if, let's say, if you meet with someone, who's a, let's say, follower of Donald Trump, or here in Pakistan, you have Imran Khan, or India, and you have Modi, like the populist, and all of them. When you speak with them, and even if you try to quote, if you try to fact check them and you tell them, like, look, this is the evidence that, counters the information you're telling me about, they will just brand you as one word: fake news. Right? They will just use that word on your face, and that's where you're like, you know what, I'm done with this. But I think that's a struggle. That's a part of it, where these leaders like this, and they have polarized the environment so much that, there used to be space where you could have a dialogue between the both sides. But now the distance has increased so much that it's hard to have that dialogue now. It is not very civil anymore. Before, people, it's not like differences it's a new thing. Political differences, it is I think older than the whole world. But yeah, people still used to sit down, no matter which side they're from, but they used to talk, they used to have a dialogue. But I think with the polarization, because of misinformation and disinformation, has increased the distances a lot. Sorry, I was saying whatever mitigation measures we come up with should focus on how to close that gap.
Indeed. And I think it's a very recent phenomenon. I just wanted to add on that part that you were saying that even 10 years ago, if you see the presidential speeches in the US of Obama and I don't know the other name, it was McCain or someone, I don't remember. But they were very respectful towards each other. They were like, I do not agree with his political views, but the person is great, right?
Yeah.
You would be okay with that this is, in the end, a game that I'm playing, a game of politics in which there's a loser and there's a winner, and that's fine, like any other game of life. But since 2016, with the whole Donald Trump thing, and also in general with Bolsonaro in Brazil, Imran Khan here, Modi in India, everywhere, you started realizing that they just don't care about politics anymore, the game of politics. They're like, it's a game of information now. So I don't care enough about the truth anymore. It's about what I want my base to hear. And that kind of changes the whole game now. And that, I think, is a very interesting segue to what misinformation and disinformation is and why is it spreading so fast. So let's discuss a little bit of those problems. So first things first, misinformation is basically unintentional spread of false information, right? Mostly those WhatsApp groups that we just mentioned, right? Those echo chambers, they just hear something from a forwarded message and you even know it now. Even WhatsApp has understood that people forward stuff so much that they've even made this forward tag on top of it to make people realize, hey, people are just forwarding this all the time. So you have this kind of information. Then you have disinformation, which is a bit more malicious. You have intentional spread of false information. So Asad, why don't you walk us through a little bit about why disinformation and misinformation spreads so fast? What could be some examples and why?
I think we have somewhat touched on it as well. I think misinformation oftentimes is spreading fastest. First of all, let's say 20, 30 years ago, you only had newspapers or, some like 2-3 channels on TV. But nowadays you have, I don't know, in Pakistan right now, I think we have 100 different news channels. But it's not just the news channels. You have Twitter, you have WhatsApp, you have Instagram, you have TikTok, you have Facebook. All these social networks that people are using every day. And let's say if I see a news on Instagram, if I see the same news on Facebook, if I see the same on Twitter, I'll be like, okay, maybe that sounds like it's the truth. So you will start also sharing that news as well. And then, as we discussed earlier as well, like the political hands are involved too, right? We saw, I think it was in the American elections, how Facebook came under fire because they were spreading fake news or misinformation through Facebook, and a lot of people were getting impacted by it as well. So and then you have the rise of social media bots as well, where they will, let's say, you tweet something, and if you have bots, if they tweet, let's say they retweeted it 100,000 times, people will be like, oh my God, this must be something very, genuine and important. So I think there are so many new tools out there now with social media, and definitely with the age of artificial intelligence as well, where even though I'm supportive of what the AI can bring in terms of good, but at the same time, when it comes to information and people, there will always be people who will misuse things, and they can really misuse it. When Donald Trump was being indicted, they made pictures of him getting arrested, right? And then those pictures were like circulated all over social media, and people were going crazy. Oh my God, he's being arrested right in the middle of New York, but that wasn't happening. So I mean, there's so much this, but I think people often forget, or maybe that is always the intention of how that disinformation can lead to the messed up kind of consequences, right? There were cases in Pakistan where disinformation based on, let's say, somebody blamed someone for that, this person said something blasphemous, and then that person ended up losing their life just based on some misinformation that was spread out through different channels. So, and I think this is not just case of Pakistan. You see that happening everywhere else.
Indeed, I think that is a very good point that you mentioned, right? The problem with the new age is that there are so many tools and so many ways of getting alternative media. But I would like to counter this argument, so I want to hear your point of view.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine who says, yes, it's great that it's sad that there is so many misuse and misinformation, but it's also great. Before, when you had only 3 channels, information was concentrated by the elite, so they were controlling you all the time. All right, now at least you have a decentralized, democratic information portal like Twitter, like Facebook, like Insta, and you don't really need to have a large barrier to entry by having so much money to own a news channel, because we know news channels have certain biases, right? Even in the West, and there's so many apps that are launching these days that are actually telling you, okay, you have newspapers with left, right, and center headlines, even in the same context. The story is the same, but the wording is a bit different. So his argument is that this part can be fixed, it needs to change, but more information is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, I have my own point of view on this that I like to counter on, but I want to hear yours first.
Now, I would like to hear your point after this too. I think I will allude to what I said earlier. You know, just like with AI, there's a good side and there's a bad side. With the same, with like, you know, elite-owned newspapers, you know, even in their time, they have broken some, you know, huge news as well. There's a movie called The Post. It, you know, covers up how they came up, broke a very, but not a point to discuss. But I think there is weight to that argument that, you know, obviously big media houses, there's the like, can't remember his name, the guy in UK who owns like newspapers in the UK, Australia, and I think Murdoch, Rupert Murdoch, right? So I think he's referring to him as an elite who owns like this information, and they can ruin people's career by spreading information like this. I agree that with social media, where the entry point is, you know, cheap and like free basically, and everyone can just become a citizen journalist. But the thing there is that it's not about, the point here is not about more, let's say, supply. The issue there is that people who are getting the news, they have now more sources to look at, but at the same time, they're not vetting their sources, right? They're just absorbing that information without thinking, is that true or false? And I think as it opens up the field for a lot of people to enter it, that doesn't mean that everyone is in it for the good. You know, everyone is in it for their own interest, and their interest can either be good or they can be bad. And most of the time it's bad.
Indeed. I think I agree with most of what you said. That the problem is that you have an increased supply, and that's great, and you have equipped the average citizen to become a citizen journalist, but you haven't equipped the average citizen to become a citizen vetter or a fact checker, right?
Yeah.
And that is where the problem lies. It's great to have more information. So that's the part I also agree with my friend with, that, okay, democratization of information is great, but you have 2 problems here. One is, okay, the citizen does not fact check everything. We're going to talk about that later in the segment of measures taken to basically detect disinformation. But also the fact that the playground that you're playing in, that the system that you're playing in, that system is already rigged in the first place, right? So it's not like it's like a playground which is fair. It's like a system which is right. No, it is a system that will give you false news and fake news and negative news on purpose, because that's what get clicks. That's what get our eyeballs. These are our psychological biases that they try to influence and exploit. Now, because of that, negative news will sell. If I give you an option of an article talking about how a cat did this very cute thing, or a dog did this very cute thing, or like Taliban destroyed something very important landmark in Afghanistan, which one will you open first out of interest? You'll be like, okay, what did they destroy first? You're going to open that one because that gives you eyeballs. And especially with bombs and everything on the picture, lighting and everything, you are more intrigued to go towards that aspect. And that is, I think, the biggest issue. The algorithm that you have in play is not transparent enough. And that also leads to the conversation that you talked about AI, that now AI is going to be coming in, and there are very, very dangerous technology in which you and I are talking exactly the way we're talking, but the words are coming out completely different, and they look like we're saying it. So how will you detect the difference between what is true and not? This is deepfake on a very, very serious level. And that it even helps you with translation. That's great. You and I want to do a podcast in Urdu as well, but we also want to do it for a global audience as well. And this would be a very good tool that translates our thing into Urdu and also looks like we're speaking Urdu so that we can also target the local audience. But imagine if this suddenly becomes a hate speech and it's with our faces, our mouths moving the same way, and we're disrespecting some very important people around us, and then suddenly we are in trouble. But that was all because of certain deep fakes that are possible. So these are the things that I'm really, really worried about. And there are some things that we can focus on to do it, but it just feels so scary that we do not have these things in place. So let's go towards the measures taken for disinformation detection. What do you think we should start with?
I mean, first of all, don't give people ideas by what you said in the end, you know, with hate speech on our faces. I don't want that. Anyway, in terms of what can be done, I think, let's say if you're talking about AI, it's still in its, infancy, but it's growing really fast, right? So I think it's a responsibility, not just on the governments, but also on big tech, that they come up with AI tools that also provides, the fact checking of these things as well. This is just like AI coming in. It's just like, when people came up with gunpowder and the people with swords were like afraid. So to beat a gun, you need a gun. You can't beat it with a sword. So AI can beat AI. I think that's what I'm trying to say. But in terms of, let's say, if you're just talking about misinformation or from news and stuff, I think there's definitely a need of more fact-checking organizations, websites, things like that, because there's so much information out there. Like in Pakistan, Geo News is one of the biggest channels here. So they came up with a website recently called Geo Fact Check. So whenever a leader says something that is a bit odd, they put it through their fact checker. There are some like senior journalists who are working on that. They look at that stuff and they make sure that, whatever has been said is that a true fact or not, or is this just some messed up opinion? And secondly, I would say the social media organizations, there's need of transparency, and they have a massive role to play. They have to regulate in the best way possible. But I understand at the same time, because they're private companies. They care about their revenues, they care about their profits, and they get their money from I think the misinformation and disinformation. So, but I think then the responsibility comes to the governments, that they regulate these social media companies to make sure that they follow on their commitments.
Yeah, indeed. I think that's a very important point you just made, right? Like, how can you blame in a capitalist environment an organization that's trying to maximize its revenue, even if it's a detriment of something, even something as important as democracy in some countries? And that is exactly the issue at hand that I have, that it's this balancing game that we have to play, because we're like, yeah, more information is great, but social media platforms need to have a better way. And they're like, yeah, but that better way means more eyeballs, and that means more misinformation. But I was thinking, okay, what about a subscription service? Then you don't need to worry about advertising revenue anymore. But even with subscription services, they would want you on the platform as long as possible to keep that subscription alive. And for that, the content will need to be constantly churned on, right? There's a reason why people from Netflix, Disney, and everyone are dropping off now, because they're like, there's not enough content, and they're not making new things, and we're getting bored. So imagine if the same thing applies on social media platform, that people just get bored. They're like, you know what, there's not enough interesting stuff anymore. No more negative news cycle. I'm not really enjoying it. That could lead to a problem. And so that is a very inherently economic issue, that maybe this technology has run its course, and we need to understand the value of what social media provides and have to be a bit more mindful. There's this book that I'm reading recently. It's called Digital Minimalism. And it's about the fact that you need to be a bit mindful about your consumption online, because they want you to stay online all the time, but you need to be more careful in how you use your time. So that is the most important point that I want to make, that the media literacy education to the masses, or generally digital literacy education to the masses, for me is the basic point, right? Before making governments and companies and anyone else accountable. The most important thing is to make the individual accountable. And once that happens, because who is the government but a perception of the people themselves, right? So they are a representation of us. So if we do not want to fact check, why would the government want to fact check? That's what I believe. So there was a study by Stanford History Education Group in which they studied 3,400 high school students in the US to evaluate their ability to differentiate between fact and fiction, and majority failed the survey. And that was the most interesting part. People do not know the difference between fact and fiction. A lot of people in the US don't even know where most of the countries in Europe are. So it's a systemic issue that we are not really discussing. So there are different organizations that work with this. So why don't you walk us through a little bit of these organizations? Tell us a little bit more about other ways that we can try to combat disinformation.
Okay, I mean, I can talk about the tools, but I think one thing I would say is whenever something that I do, because I'm a researcher, I'm an analyst, is that whenever I hear or read information, the best advice that you can get from researchers is that, try to find the primary source, try to find the end of the rope. Where does it come from? Where does it start from? So whenever you hear some kind of fact or an opinion presented as a fact, or even a fact, it's a study, quoting someone saying that, oh, do you know that this percent of people are doing this thing? And you're like, oh, really? Instead of saying that, you say, okay, but, let me check. You have this in your hands. Every time I do this a lot with my father, because he will quote something, and now he knows this is my habit, because he says something and I go like this. I was like, wait a second. And I was like, if it's true, I'll let him know that, yeah, actually you're right. But if it's wrong, it's not like this is wrong, but this is the right information. So make sure that's what you're telling people. So now he knows that I do this, and I think he understands that as well. And he comes to me and gets his information fact checked as well. So I think first there are companies and stuff like that, but I think as individuals, we can take that responsibility as well with people who are close to us. Change yourself first, and then slowly you can have that impact in your circle as well. But I think there are in China, let's say there's called something called Sina Weibo. They're also working on, they'll have like committee that sits down on information and checks and make sure if this is correct or not. And then there are different fact-checking websites like Snoop 16, Truth or Fiction 17, and PolitiFact 18 that can be used to verify information as well. And as I mentioned, in Pakistan, there is GeoFactCheck. But the biggest friend that you can find, sometimes you just have to Google. You have to see the information. And another thing that I would suggest is always try to look the opposite information as well. Like if there's an information about something, and then you can say, okay, what is the other side of it? Always try to see the other side of the coin as well. It will just make you a better analyst.
Oh, I think the last part, that's wonderful advice, Asad, because that's exactly how I also try to navigate the world around me. You know what? I always ask myself, I'm like, how do I know I'm right? Right? Okay, yeah, I want to be very adamant in saying it that, okay, I know this study or this, and my experience from the world around me, but how do I know I'm right? And I keep asking myself this question to everyone around me. I'm like, okay, how can I be so sure that what I'm saying is the correct information? And they always tell me, okay, the first step could be that you're asking this question, right? The first step is if you're asking this question, you're already in the right direction, because you're like, okay, am I sure that this is right? And that leads to the next point, as you said, that, okay, what is the opposing view? A good empirical method, the method of empiricism, is that you have a hypothesis and you try to disprove it till it's not disprovable, right? You try to look at the opposing views till there are none that can hold up against it. And I think that's a very good way of thinking about life, that you have a view that, okay, I think green color is great. I think this yellow color behind me is great. And the first thing to do is to look against that fact and be like, you know what? Okay, so let me look at red, let me look at blue, let me look at green. And then slowly start the elimination process. And I can imagine that would be difficult, right? I can imagine that would be difficult. That would be intense. And we are cognitively lazy people, right? That's why you have the concept of nudging and misinformation and all of that stuff, because people are just very easy in their passiveness. They're like, you know what, let it be. Like your father is like, you know what, I heard this. this is the truth. But then he comes to you for fact checking. He doesn't fact check himself because it's natural, it's normal. Therefore, all of us would be like, you know what, we're lazy. So that's why organizations and researchers are great that they help us out. But I would like us to get a little bit unlazy, right? Take the responsibility to do this. Democracy and generally truth is worth the effort that you need to put in. I always have this concern, especially in the Western world. I think this might not apply to Pakistan as much as in the Western world. This era of the individual, right? This will be another topic for another day, but this era of the individual where you're all about me and not about society is the reason we're stuck in this, because the main problem with the misinformation campaigns these days, it's all about, okay, what I'm saying is the truth, listen to me. I'm like, yeah, but what about what everyone else is saying? That doesn't matter. Listen to me. I'm the one who's telling the truth. I'm the one who's important, not you guys. And that leads to an issue of low voter turnout, of people always finding issues to argue over, people saying that, no, my happiness is more important than societal happiness. And I think that's a very, very interesting way to close the conversation, because that's going to be a topic for another day, and I don't want to take up the time today for that. Before we close off, Asad, do you want to add anything?
I think just to end on what you said, I think you're right maybe about the laziness, but I think there's another very important aspect, that is ego, right? And not being humble enough to sometimes accept that what you know can be wrong. We always have this idea that, as you're saying, you know, I know this, I'm right, but I think we need to be we just need to be more comfortable sometimes being wrong, sometimes not having all the information. And I think being a researcher or being even a writer or anything that you want to be, I think it's important that you become comfortable with being wrong. You can be wrong, it's okay. Most of the days you're right, some days you can be wrong, but I think it's important to accept this. That way you can go over to the other side as well, where you can say, you know, I used to be wrong. Maybe I will never be 100% right, but I'm trying to be. But to do that, first you have to accept, like, you know, when you have a sickness or when you're not feeling well, first thing that you have to admit is that I am sick. Now I have to take the medicine.
Yeah.
But if you go like, hey, nothing is wrong with me, and then the sickness eventually kills you, I think that's...
It's like, Monica.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To end with friends. Yes.
No, indeed, that's actually correct. That's exactly what I said. What I meant when I said at the start of the thing, like holding your beliefs loosely, right? That doesn't really translate just for religious beliefs, but also beliefs like, okay, am I right? Am I left? Or beliefs that, okay, am I doing the things correctly or not? Anything that you believe, that beliefs are not your identity. And I think people make this mistake, right? They like, you know what? I am right. I am left. I'm a conservative. I'm a Pakistani. You know, I'm this, I'm that. Because of that, our beliefs become our identity. And this is something I know out of experience, that if you try to challenge someone's beliefs, you're basically challenging someone's identity. And it's quite normal and natural for them to react and be angry with you. Because imagine if I challenge your identity. If I say, no, Asad, you are not who you are. It is quite natural and human for you to be mad at me. And that empathy, as you said, right, looking at the other side, that empathy is very important when you're having these conversations. Because if you don't have empathy to understand that, yes, people hold their beliefs too tightly, and we need to teach and train and educate them slowly, that your beliefs are not a part of you. It is just a belief that can be updated over time. Right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Asad. I think this was a wonderful conversation. I loved having you over, and I will love to keep having you over. So just for everyone else who might be listening, Asad and a group of other people will be part of our regular lineup. They are my co-hosts throughout this whole journey of difficult conversations and our journey to make it easier. So I will be meeting Asad again in a few episodes down the road, and we're going to be talking about something more interesting. Hopefully, and we're gonna be bringing something new on the table for you guys. So thank you so much, Asad, for your time, and for everyone else, please follow us on Vasl at Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok, or what have you, and do see if you can sign up for our newsletter. so that we will summarize what we do here in a writing format. For those of you who are not interested in listening to a 40-minute podcast, it can be distilled into a good one-pager or two that you can read with your coffee in the morning on a Saturday. I think that's about it. So thank you so much, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.